Good morning, afternoon, evening, or middle of the night, everyone. My name is Chet Monday, and I'm the Director of Youth Engagement with March for Science. Allow me the pleasure of introducing my co-moderator, the international superhero, poet, vigilante, Selina Leem.
Thank you, Chet. My name is Selina Lam, and I am honored to be your co-moderator today as we connect with leading climate warriors from around the world. Thank you so much to Island Innovation for hosting this virtual island summit, and we are so excited to bring you some deep diving conversations on next generation leadership.
So to kick off this event, we're going to be joined by global focal points of YOUNGO. And for those of you who don't know, YOUNGO is the official youth constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So essentially, it's the architecture of the United Nations that provides youth and young leaders a literal seat at the table for the annual climate change negotiations that take place during COP, or the Conference of Parties. So without much further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome Heeta Lakhani and Marie-Claire Graf.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Hi, hello, great to see you guys.
Great to see both of you.
Hello. Well, we are so excited to talk with both of you. To give our viewers some background, could you please tell us about the history of YOUNGO, your roles within YOUNGO, and how youth leaders are integrated into the UNFCCC process?
Absolutely, yes, sure. So YOUNGO, as already mentioned, is the official children and youth constituency to the UNFCCC. So this is basically the space for young people to engage with the UN on climate-related matters. So last year, we celebrated our 10th anniversary, and Heeta and myself, we are the two current elected global focal points. So we are doing the liaison with external stakeholders. Yeah, our vision is to empower children and youth really around the world to take action and enhance the skills and capacity and really be able to drive the agenda forward in ambitious climate actions and policies for more climate justice, on all different levels. So we are focusing on mainly 4 different aspects, really raising awareness, knowledge, capacity building, but also, of course, having a network, because we are a network itself, collaboration, foster cooperation within YOUNGO around the world, but also support in the policy lobby advocacy work, but of course also the youth actions, going on the strike, doing some other actions inside and outside the UN. So that's us, that's YOUNGO.
Great, well, thank you so much for that background. And Heeta, recently YOUNGO joined our Science Not Silence campaign, rallying support around the Ipcc 1.5 degree report as an organizing partner. So could you talk a little bit about how that report has been addressed within YOUNGO and what you've witnessed at previous COPs?
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Chet. We've had a working group on the Ipcc 1.5 degrees report. And this working group has actually been advocating since a couple of years now, since the report was out, for the report to be welcomed. And it has been active at the negotiations, especially last year at the intersessions and also at the COPs. We were lobbying with negotiators. Personally, from my personal experience, I have actually seen geopolitical relationships play out in front of me. We've seen countries like Saudi Arabia and, other Middle East countries blocking the report. And we've also seen, bigger countries, bigger players like the USA supporting them behind the scenes. So it has definitely been an eye-opener, and it has made us realize how important it is not just to advocate for the report, but also to ensure that you push your countries to do the same. Because no matter what we do, at the end of the day, it's the countries that are sitting and negotiating, and we have to ensure that we get our voices through to them.
Definitely. And such a response from big leaders has been devastating, as it has been angering, and also been pushing a lot of people to really do more actions, as you've mentioned. So what would you advise young people who want to get more involved in climate action, both globally and in their own countries?
Yeah, so if you really want to engage on the UN level, and especially with the UNFCCC, so I really advise you to join YOUNGO, not only because it's a great network, but also because you can easily be lost, right, in these big negotiations, but also then join the March for Science team. So I will just share quickly here the membership form, so you can sign up here if you want to join YOUNGO. But in general, like how you start is really find your own passion. What is driving you? Where is your enthusiasm? So it can be climate and gender or agriculture, technology, research, nature-based solution. I mean, there are really so many different angles, and it's really important that you find what you are burning for. And then, I mean, you don't have to set up your own NGO. There are a lot of small NGOs and national NGOs around. So you can also join an NGO and maybe later on establish something yourself. So there are multiple options to get involved. So really try to have one foot in something. And then I think it's an amazing journey. And yeah, maybe like the third point, really don't get overwhelmed. It can be very challenging because we are dealing with such a frustrating issue, right, on a daily basis. And then especially if you come to the UN, it's so big and so many things are going on. So you can easily get frustrated. But yeah, please stay with us, and I'm really sure that we are going to make it. And yeah, YOUNGO is a great network also then to recharge your energy and find some friends. Yeah, absolutely. And then yeah, as already mentioned, really encourage everyone to apply for our joint March for Science Global Ambassador Network. So this is a network we are establishing right now at the moment. So you're just in time. And it goes through the YOUNGO community. And so we are looking for global leaders from across the planet to apply and then give them resources and tools and a platform for collaboration to align all the efforts around also the Ipcc report and support each other, that we don't feel so alone in this fight. And so there is a limit of 5 ambassadors per country. But yeah, we hope that everyone here is going to apply, and we really hope of getting a lot of applications and can engage with you further. So the March for Science team will post it also in the chat, but also I think on the when you see it on the live stream. And yeah, otherwise, please reach out to us. We're very happy to support you when it comes to YOUNGO or when it comes to the Global Ambassador Network. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marie-Claire. And we are so excited about our partnership with YOUNGO and launching the Global Youth Ambassadors Network. So please, for those of you who haven't yet, sign up for YOUNGO and sign up for the Global Youth Ambassadors Network. I promise you won't regret it. We're going to get some things done. Now, final question, Heeta. What message do you have for governments, leaders, and officials who are tuning in? How can they support YOUNGO's global efforts and demands?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is great. We're calling on governments from across the world to join the Science Not Silence campaign. And it's science with SC 1.5 NCE. So it's the 1.5 which is highlighted here. And later this month, that is during the United Nations General Assembly, YOUNGO March for Science and the Island Resilience Partnership, we've partnered with the AOSIS, that is the Alliance of Small Island States, to host an event that would highlight governments who are publicly supporting the Ipcc 1.5 degree special report and also uniting behind the science. And the Islands Resilience Forum will take place on September 29th, and we hope that government officials interested in participating will join us. And if you are connected to government leaders that you think should be interested or would be interested in joining this, please fill out the form that March for Science will post later in the chat. So yeah, definitely sign up, and also for young people across the world, join our Youth Ambassadors Network.
So just echoing on that, if you didn't hear, please sign out and fill out the form. Thank you both so much for joining us. You know, we couldn't imagine a better way to start off this program and other than highlighting the impact of YOUNGO and your leadership. As a reminder, we will be dropping the link for viewers to join YOUNGO in the chat, as well as the links for the Global Ambassadors Network and the upcoming Island Resilience Forum. Now, please join me in welcoming our first panel of young island leaders from the Pacific region. Chet, please take it away.
Welcome back to the Virtual Island Summit. We are very excited to be joined by 3 amazing climate warriors from the Pacific. Joe Moyono Colio is a Samoan climate activist who is the Pacific head for Greenpeace. Through advocacy and government, his goal is to ensure a livable climate for generations to come. Komal Naraya is a Pacific Island representative from the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, and she is from the Fiji Islands. Komal is currently a global ambassador for education with a World at School Global Youth Ambassador Network. Solomon Yo is a politics and law graduate from the University of South Pacific and is dedicated to fighting the climate crisis. He's the campaign's director for Pacific Island Student Fighting Climate Change, who've been pushing for Pacific governments to take the issue of climate change and human rights to the International Court of Justice. Thank you all so much for joining.
Yes, thank you all for joining us. As a fellow Pacific Islander, it's a real pleasure to be part of this conversation. So, to kick things off, could each of you please share your personal climate story and talk about the climate action that you're spearheading? Joe, if we can start off with you, please.
Sure, thanks, Selina. It's Chet. Hello, everyone. I am Joe from Samoa, Greenpeace, head of Pacific. My arrival, I suppose, into this climate space was really triggered by something I saw when I was a 16-year-old. My father took me to where his old school, primary school, used to be, and we were standing underneath a foot of water. We were standing on the foundations of the old school. And it wasn't until I was much older that I made that connection with climate change and with the issue, and then the stories, hearing the stories from our elders in the village of how things have changed, how they've had to adapt to changing environment and changing climate. That really for me was the conduit to really arrive into this space and to be passionate about this work that I do. And I used to work as well as part of a church faith organization. And there was also, I think it was an expression of faith to me, a wake-up call as well, that you can't worship a creator without caring for creation. And so those kind of two parts of my life kind of coalesced and came together, and is really what's kind of brought me into the climate space now.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing that. Could we ask Kamal to share hers?
Well, thank you, Selina and Chet, for having us on this discussion today. And Bula, and good morning, guys. So my name is Kamal, and I'm from Fiji. So I guess what really triggered me the most and got me thinking about this whole idea of climate change and the situation that we are in now would be in 2015 and in early 2016, when Fiji and the Pacific, we had to feel the brunt of tropical cyclone Winston. So that sort of was a real eye-opener for me, seeing firsthand that, this is what a high-intensity tropical cyclone can do to us, a Category 5 cyclone, the many lives it took, the many livelihoods and households it destroyed. So it just sort of made me take a step back and just look around me and just sort of get that thinking started, that if this is the situation that we are in right now, right here, what would be our future in the next even 5 or 10 years to come? And every year things are getting even more and more difficult. Sea levels are rising. We are facing, the tropical cyclones are getting more frequent here, and even a Category 3 cyclone does the same level of damage as a Category 5 cyclone. So it just all got me thinking and just made me sort of start finding a niche and see how I could sort of just give back to the community and, be able to contribute to this space. So all this thinking just sort of made me become a part of the Alliance for Future Generations Fiji. So I'm also part of the group as the assistant coordinator. So we're basically a youth-led network which looks at all the aspects of the Sustainable Development Goals, and climate change is a cross-cutting issue or a cross-cutting agenda that we include in all the work that we do. And I think for the past 2-3 years, I've been actively involved on climate climate action, climate advocacy, ocean health and sustainability. So yeah, I guess this is how the whole journey started.
Thank you, Kamal. I'm glad that you brought in from that angle because it really shows how the situation we are in, the vulnerability and where we are from, but at the same time, it has enabled us to find the fight in ourselves to go into this path because we are wanting to protect our home. So thank you for that. So can Solomon please share?
Thank you, Kamal and Joseph, for sharing your story as well. It's really appreciated to hear that as well. Thank you, March for Science and Virtual Island Summit for this, having the PISFCC here as well. For me personally, I think climate change has always been like bothering me when I was growing up in the Solomon Islands and the Pacific as well. But it never really struck me as the level it struck when I came to the University of South Pacific to do my political science and law degree. And as I'm learning to do more in detail about the issues and how the climate change regime is coming to an impasse, it's really frustrating to knowing that, like, even how could a small island states like Solomon Islands or any other small island states have a meaningful say in international politics, right? But I was wrong, and I abandoned that mentality in an international environmental class last year. I overlooked two really important points that I shamefully admit is that in spite of our land size and our economies, we do have the same vote like at the UN, like any other powerful states, like the US. And second, I forgot to recall Epeli's Hauerfer's teaching that mainstream mentality of the island nations are seen as small. It misses the massive oceans that surround and form an integral part of our livelihoods. Our islands, nations, alongside our brothers and sisters in Caribbeans, Maldives, and elsewhere in the world who are other island nations, are not small, but we have a massive size in oceans, which I would like to really encourage people to really reconceptualize how they see the Pacific as not a small island states, but as big ocean sustainable states, and who has and will continue to play an important role in the well-being of humanity.
So thank you for your views and for all of your personal stories. So as many of you know, March for Science, we believe that science is at the intersection of all social movements. It helps us better understand the challenges that we face, as well as informs how best we solve those challenges and achieve meaningful progress. So could each of you just go a little bit into how science informs your advocacy? Kamal, could we start with you?
I guess with the level of advocacy work that we do, I think science plays a very crucial work, not just in climate change, but whatever advocacy work that you're heavily engaged in, because it sort of helps you link science, the evidence that's there, the policy, and then you just sort of focus it onto the groundwork or the community work that you're doing. So for us, youth who are active in the space of climate change and oceans, I think it is really important because it sort of helps us. When you read up about it, you learn that, okay, now we have a Ipcc special report on oceans. We have a special report on 1.5 degrees. So this is what the science is telling us. This is what the scientists are recommending, that, we need to lower our greenhouse gas emissions. We need to come up with more adaptive measures to be able to curb the effects of climate change. And in these many years, this is how the Pacific will suffer. Sea level will rise more and more. So just coming to know of all these things, it just sort of makes you sit down and think of what is the most simplistic manner that, I can summarize or simplify this information for the general public or the community that I'm working with. So, when you do community visits or when we're having some advocacy sessions, we tell them that, this is what the science is telling us, but you don't really need to overwhelm yourself with all this information. So this is where the youth advocates, we come in and we simplify it for them. We'll be like, okay, why don't you make the switch from using plastic straws every day to just, keeping metal straws with you, or using reed straws, just cycling or walking short distances instead of using cars, or, just figuring out how to offset your carbon footprints. So, you can do this, but it doesn't really have to be too complicated. You can do this by, so for example, for us here in Fiji, what we normally do is when we have any conferences that we're attending and we need to take a flight for that, we measure the distance that we're traveling, and it sort of gives you an estimate of how many mangroves you need to plant when we come back home, So yeah, science plays a very important role in this, and it sort of helps us create that linkage between what's happening at the grassroots level, and ensuring that effective policy implementation are taking place, and at the same time, it's being able to actively take heed of what the science is, telling us.
Absolutely, I love that. It is kind of like a lingua franca for different levels of advocacies, right? We all share science. Solomon, what about you?
Kamal sums it up all well. But just to and thank you, Kamal, for that. Just to sum up, to add on to some points there is that the reason why Ipcc reports and other science reports around the world are so appealing to us, especially for us in the Pacific Islands, is because when you read the documents, it's so relatable. Like you see all this, sort of the warnings and impacts it has in our backyard. You see it in our daily lives. We experience it daily. In relation to the ICJO campaign, science is one of the main impetus for the campaign, because we are really convinced by the science, as I said earlier before, and as Kamal highlighted. We want to use the science. We really want to amplify its role in, especially decision making, more, give it more power in that decision making. And that is precisely what the ICJO, we believe, could do, because the ICJO is the optimal legal forum to endorse the best scientific findings on the anthropogenic climate change, notably the Ipcc special reports on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Some people will say, well, it's a court, it doesn't really focus on science, but the court has recently demonstrated a willingness to really engage with the complex and competing scientific claims, as you have seen in the whaling case, in the Antarctic case between Australia and Japan. And this is one of the core benefits of what the ICJO on climate change and human rights can deliver, because the ICJ findings on the fact on climate change, in other words, of Professor Philip Sands, would be a great authority in the proceedings before other international courts and tribunals, and of course, before national courts as well. So I think that's why scientific science is so important behind not just our activism campaign, but other campaigns around the world. It's the fuel that drives the campaign. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, what a beautiful answer, and put in practice too. I think that's so important when you look at the court system and how it relates. So finally, Joe, what about you? How does science affect your advocacy?
I think as a baseline, the science is the primary driver for collating the most accurate and up-to-date data and information so that we can create policy and make advocacy asks based on the best available science. I think Kamal and Solomon summed up quite well the importance of science as a primary ingredient in our work as climate advocates. I would also draw attention to the fact that there is the science that is the climatologists and other scientists are pushing as well, but lesser known, but no less important, is the indigenous science and the indigenous and customary knowledge that people on the islands and around the world as well have been using to adapt to the changing situation, but also the effect of the climate on those bodies of customs and knowledge, which are slowly becoming degraded due to the unpredictability of the climate system. So for us, like, science is such a broad field, but it is the primary base from which you build solid policy, solid advocacy asks, and then take that together with customary knowledge of, people in Samoa, for example, have been practicing this very integrated knowledge of the environment for, close to 3,000 years. So you take those together, those form the fundamentals from which we move in this space and do this kind of work. So yeah, extremely important.
Thank you so much for those answers. And really for putting that in perspective. As you said, science is such a broad field. So sorry for the broad question, but thank you for translating that and specifying with each of your fields.
Yeah, I love that you all brought in that perspective and really showing how science explains how basic actions that you take every day can have an impact on our environment and the climate, and especially for indigenous cultures and beliefs and practices as most of it you really see from natural patterns, and all of these natural patterns are being disrupted, and maybe often are confused why this is so, what is happening right now. And science is really able to explain exactly the unpredictableness of all the happenings that is being done to our environment. So continuing on the topic of science, island nations are really familiar with the slogan 1.5 to stay alive. But over the past few years, we've seen a very concerted effort to undermine science and downplay the risks that 1.5 faces and it poses to the world. So to our speakers, why do you think it is important that the UNFCCC formally welcomes the IPCC report 1.5 degree at the COP26? So any one of you can start.
Okay, I guess, okay, I'll just probably try and answer that for you. Because when I heard this question, it just sort of really got me thinking, and I know that those who were present in Poland in 2018 sort of knows the frustration of it and what happened there when the 1.5 degree report was being talked about. Because for us here in the Pacific, I think it is a very crucial one because it determines the direction that we spearhead our future. And one of the key messages that came out very strongly from this report was that we are already seeing the consequences of it, just by 1 degree of global warming that is being caused. So imagine if we exceed that 1.5 degrees Celsius mark, what will happen to us? Because like I said, here in the Pacific, we are already facing rising sea levels. So thousands and thousands of coastal communities will have to relocate, but where will we get the resources and money to be able to do that? How will we, and then it also brings it down to the lives of the people as well. And how do we justify that? So, and then you also sort of talking about that science is something that you cannot negotiate on, or that this is not really in our mandate to be sitting here and discussing about the 1.5 degrees report because it is too scientific. But then you need to start sort of seeing it from the perspective of our lens as well, the people who are actually being affected by it, because even for the bigger countries right now, they might not be seeing the effects of it, but then, no one country can say that climate change is not affecting them in any way. So I guess you just need to start seeing the realities of it and come out of the bubble and be able to see how the livelihoods of, millions and millions of people are being affected right now. So what more evidence do you need to be able to make that decision and bring it formally back to the, the UNFCCC table? So, yeah.
I think it's important. I think it's important is a bit of an understatement. It's absolutely crucial that the UNFCCC, that the 1.5 SR report on 1.5 is extremely crucial. I mentioned earlier that in order for us to be in the best position to address the crisis, we have to have the best set of policies. We have to be able to set the best and the most ambitious action plans in order to meet it. And you can't have those without the 1.5 report being accepted by countries. The other ironic thing is these countries asked for the report. And so for us to then go through a long period of collecting that data and bringing that all forward, and then for these larger developed countries to not accept it, really speaks to the character of these of the political agendas of these countries, who would put off the long-term gain for some short-term advantage gain from adhering to maintaining the fossil fuel economy. So, yeah, without accepting the 1.5 report, that spelled, perceivably disastrous consequences for the Pacific. The difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees could be the difference between us, staying on our islands and having our culture survive, and not. I mean, it's quite simple as that.
Just to add on a bit to Kamal's that points on this, why the science is not negotiable, because we've seen this opportunity again puts on to the fore the best scientific findings on climate change, But as we can see in Rio and Kyoto and probably other in decision-making areas, the science is downplayed to fall below and lock in on the next best science, or the lower hanging fruit of the science evidence, and they use that to make the decision around it. So this opportunity then presents itself that do we go for the best science available that we have at the moment, or do we choose a lesser science that is probably downplayed and does not reflect the harsh reality of today?
So, finally, we're big believers in events being action-oriented, and all of you are doing such amazing things. So how can climate advocates tuning in right now support what you're doing, and what can they do to amplify your impact?
My message would be quite simple, because whichever event or whichever discussion you go to, this is something that's often talked about. So I guess it's just basically our small actions that we pledge in our daily lives that leads to bigger changes. So just being vocal about your concerns, or going green. If your leaders are doing something wrong, being able to question them, talking to your families and your peers about the work that you're doing and how you think will be bringing about the changes, around you in terms of climate change. So, getting them to support you in this journey and walking the talk. So it's just all about being there for each other and just making the very small changes in your everyday lives. Like, just switching from plastic straws to metal straws, cycling instead of using your car every day, beach cleanup activities, mangrove planting. So yeah, just continuing whatever you're doing at the moment and just being able to create that level of impact, around for the people around you as well. So yeah.
I guess my message to the world, the other youth advocates around the world, is that this is a great solution, the concrete solution towards the climate crisis, the ICJO campaign from the Pacific. And it's not the first time that the Pacific has voyaged to the ICJ. And they have played a crucial role in the 1996 advisory opinion on nuclear weapons. Countries like Samoa has been played an instrumental role in the case in adducing the representation on the Pacific Coalition then. But now, once again, the Pacific is now embarking on that similar voyage charted towards the world's highest court. And but now focused more into seeking justice, climate justice, apologies. So the question to the world, the other youths, is that will the other youths of the world join the Pacific once again to take this journey? So all I'm saying is we would encourage youth from all over the world to join us in our side event this September. We're having it on the 25th during the UN Climate Week. And the title of our event is Youth Leading the Way, Seeking Justice at the ICJ. You can learn more about the campaign and see entry points of where you can potentially join it. Yeah, so we will be also launching the World Youth for Climate Justice. That is the umbrella body of the ICJ global campaign, and of course created and led by the youth of the world. So this is where potentially all youth, other advocates who are interested in the campaign could potentially join as we collectively work towards this common goal.
Real quick plug, but this is related to what my advice would be. We're actually kind of midway through shooting a documentary here in Samoa about climate change, and we're looking at it from a more human perspective, the effects on culture, on people, rather than the usual kind of doom and gloom climate documentary. We're looking at the resilience of specific cultures and people to kind of had to live in this perpetual state of adaptation and rehabilitation. So the reason why we're doing that is because you can become very left-brain, policy data centered, right, when you're talking about climate change. But climate change at its heart is an issue and it's a question about humanity. It's a human issue. And as long as you put people at the core of this, I think you're headed in the right direction. So my advice to any budding climate advocate or someone who is in this space is pay attention to the people, especially the people at the front lines, because the pace at which people on the front lines are moving should be the pace the entire movement is moving, because the most vulnerable among us are having to be the most resilient. And I think if we can clue into that, centering those people at the front lines centering their stories and their voices and their asks, then I think this movement could go a very, very long way.
Heard it all, and please keep in tune to Kamal, Joe, and Solomon's activities and projects. Thank you all so much for joining us. Those were really incredibly inspiring words from you all as amazing, inspiring leaders. This concludes our Pacific panel, and we'll now be joined by our climate warriors from the AIMS region, who will be giving us a deep dive on the Seychelles. Please stand by while we welcome our next speakers.
Yes, thank you. And we are incredibly excited about this conversation with three absolute rock stars. Please join me in welcoming our next panelists, Angelique, Elisa, and Shafira. So Angelique is the CEO of Seychelles Conservation and Adaptation Trust, barrister and attorney at law. She's a legal expert in climate change, oceans, and global commons. And she speaks on blue economy, islanders' rights, and legal barriers to gender equality. Now, Elisa is a senior policy analyst for the Seychelles Department of Energy and Climate Change. She is currently part of the team drafting the first national climate change policy for Seychelles. And then Shafira is an environmental activist with a passion for animal welfare, who volunteers consistently with various humanitarian groups. And she also owns her own graphic design and marketing company, Simple Creativity.
Wow, what a line. Thank you all for joining us. So, a question that we really like to ask, could you please share with us your personal climate story and how it all started, and also the current climate action that you guys are taking leadership on? May we start with Angelique, please?
All right, thanks so much for inviting us. I'm Angelique, and I'm from the islands of Seychelles. So my climate story really started when I returned to Seychelles after studying in the United Kingdom, and started taking a new lens at looking at my country, really appreciating the things that I took for granted. And whilst I started off as very much a youth advocate, advocating for sustainable development, I then had the opportunity to be trained as a climate change negotiator with the Alliance of Small Island States. So I sort of moved from advocacy to perhaps a different type of advocacy, focusing mostly on negotiation with adaptation and loss and damage. And today my role is one of financing climate action. So it's a really nice position to be in when you're able to select the type of projects and initiatives that's going to support climate action, and in particular those driven by young people.
Wow, how very powerful, starting with learning to appreciate what you have and wanting to protect that. Definitely something that we can all learn from. Could we hear from Elisa, please?
Yes. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, dear panelists and participants. Firstly, I'd like to thank Island Innovation for inviting me to join this event. So thank you, moderators, for giving me this opportunity to speak. So yes, my name is Elisa Lalande. I come from the Seychelles Islands, but right now I'm currently based in New York. Like Angelique said, she did a fellowship with the EOSIS, which is a coalition group under the UN that represents a voice for all of the SIDS in the Caribbean, in the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So I am currently the EOSIS fellow for this year. But like the moderator mentioned earlier, the policy for climate change itself has already been drafted. It's been sent to the Cabinet of Ministers, so that was done. So basically that was my role. Because I'm still working for the government of Seychelles. I represent the government of Seychelles. But yes, but that bit is already done. The policy, the national climate change policy for Seychelles was under my leadership, and it was actually approved on the 20th of May this year, 2020. But sadly, I was not there in Seychelles for its submission, but it got validated and it went through. So yes, just about myself with climate change. I would say that my passion for climate change actually started at home. So I grew up in a place surrounded by nature, and like when growing up, playing around with your siblings and cousins, it's just like it got in you. And then going to school, I did a lot of like activities for my school. I was in this club, which is called the Wildlife Club. So I got to go out there and learn about the environment and learn about climate change. And I guess that's how like it kept going and going, because I got the chance to participate in a lot of events alongside a lot of NGOs also, and also got the government itself. But really, I kept moving forward with it, because when I went to university, I wanted to do something related to, I wanted to keep it broad. So that's why I studied sustainable development, because I wanted to keep my passion growing. And after university, I went to work for the government, because I wanted to bring back something for the people, for the people of Seychelles. So yes, just with regards to what the focal point of YOUNGO, Mary Claire said, it was just about like the passion, finding your passion and really where you wanted to go. So that's why I kept going and kept going. And like now my main focus is really on the fellowship. And when I'm done, I hope to return back to my home country, the Seychelles, and give back what I have learned here in New York City. Thank you.
Alyssa, what a wonderful job you're doing. And through the trajectory that you just shared with your journey and your career, being able to connect the international climate arena with the groundworks that are happening in your home country, all of that is able to come together, and we hopefully and are seeing a lot of fruitful efforts and actions being done. So thank you for sharing that. Can we have Shafira please share her story, please?
Hi everyone. Good evening to you all. Well, yeah, in Seychelles it's evening. So my name is Shafira. I'm 24. I was always a member of Five Eyes Club as well, from the age of 8 until I finished my A-levels. Then I joined SIA, of which I am currently the vice treasurer. So SIA stands for SIDS Youth Aims Hub, and it's a regional NGO in the SIDS. It's a regional NGO in the SIDS and also in the AIMS region that aims for youth-led sustainable development projects. But we have also done a lot of work and activities in relation to climate change, like COP in my city, tree planting, mangrove planting activities, recycling workshops, educational workshops on climate change. And we also lobbied the plastic bag ban in the Seychelles. So that's a summary.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your stories. And I think that's so important because it influences the work you do immensely. So next question, could each of you just discuss a little bit about how science informs your advocacy and also the importance of the Ipcc 1.5 degree special report? Alyssa, we would love to begin with you.
Okay, thank you, moderator, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Now, with regards to science, of course, I would like to say we simply cannot deny the science of climate change, and not just climate change, but really what's happening to the ocean. We're talking about ocean acidification, for example, rising temperatures. And we still need to bear in mind that a lot of people, they deny the science, but really we cannot ignore what's happening, like when you get outside and you look outside, you can feel the changes. And I guess this is why, for example, when we drafted the national climate change policy, we made a lot of reference to the Ipcc reports, for example. Like last year we had this special report on the ocean, and let us not forget that as it says, we're so known as a large ocean state, and we always talk about the climate ocean nexus here, like I've mentioned before. It's not just about ocean acidification, but really our marine ecosystems and how the rising temperatures are affecting that, and how it's affecting people's livelihoods. And of course, we used a lot of, like I said, we made a lot of reference of with the science for climate change, because we, like it's mentioned before in the previous panel, we also realize that climate change is a cross-cutting issue. So it's not just affecting the people that are concerned in climate change. So by using the science and informing the public of our whole goal and vision and what we really want for Seychelles, we want to make everyone feel concerned, that sea level is rising and it's going to affect you. Because a lot of times, I guess that people, they don't really understand what the science is saying about climate change. So we hope that with the policy, for example, if we made the reference from the science and we made it into, how can I say it, as much more of a simplified version in some way for them to understand, like, this is what's happening, this is how it's going to affect you, this is what we need to do. And hopefully we'll bring everyone on board. But yes, it does help to promote advocacy in many areas. But of course, that's going to be on an individual level, government level, NGOs also, they have a role. So it's like bringing everyone, even the civil society, together to do their bit, rather than just relying on one sector to do everything. Because whenever we think of climate change, for example, back home, especially if we're talking about the science, we're probably going to think of scientists or probably just the government. But we also need to realize that we all have our bits to tackle the issue. Thank you, moderator.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. And what about you, Shafira?
Yes, so I think science is the reason why we're doing this in the first place. If it wasn't for science, we wouldn't be aware of what's going on and how to really, what to really do. And in regards to the Ipcc, it is proven that seeds are vulnerable, right? So we are on the front liners. We have been saying that for so long, and and we really want a fair deal. Like, we want islands to be made a priority. And I believe that climate change is not just an issue, but it's survival for us. It's about our identity, and we don't want to lose that, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. No, yeah, you hit it head on. So Angelique, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's interesting how we are seeing science being ignored in many different facets right now, especially with health crises and with the climate crisis. But I want to take it from two angles. And the first, looking at it from the litigation angle, as our friends from the Pacific talked about. I was able to do a piece of research about, bringing about litigation on behalf of small islands for the loss that is and will be caused. And one of the things that's very difficult to show evidence of is causation. And I think with more science, and in particular attribution studies, we will be able to really make that connection between the large emitters and the impacts that we're facing in small islands. So I think we do need more science for climate change as well, to be further developed. And I say that thinking about the UN Ocean Science Decade for Sustainable Development, it's very interesting how now the emphasis is not science for the sake of science, but science for sustainable development. And I think that really needs to continue growing, even thinking of it from a perspective of financing, which is what the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust does. We are funding projects that are scientifically based, so that it can inform policy. So the two have to go together. Even though you're running a scientific project, you have to show us how the science will then inform policy. So that's a very important and critical role of science, both from the level of advocacy, but also financing. And I think everybody knows that AOSIS has always prioritized science and based their negotiating positions on science. But I'd like to end on some thoughts on the Ipcc report. It was really an I told you so moment for SIDS, right? Because we've been saying this for a very long time. But at the same time, the findings were very bleak. and one which makes you really think that it's going to be a survival issue even before the disappearing islands phenomenon happens, right? It's because there's not going to be enough land for agriculture. Your ecosystems are going to collapse. And this is even if we do reach 1.5 and we're not on the trajectory to get there. So I think what the IPCC report needs to bring about is just not thinking of it as science, but thinking of it as a call to action and the need for ambition when it comes to mitigation. And that's definitely something we need to see more of, not just to say it's a great report, but to act upon it. Thanks.
Brilliant. So as to summarize, we need to stop denying science and we need to move on to action. So on that note, how can folks tuning in can meaningfully support your efforts? And since we're running a bit behind, can you please do your best 30-second elevator pitch?
Shall I start?
Go ahead.
Great. Do something. Start somewhere. That's my elevator pitch. Do something and start somewhere. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll go. We have people talking about the vulnerability of SIDS and fighting for the cause. Talking is one thing. We can talk and talk, but like we need to be heard and we need action. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I'll go. I would just say act now rather than having to wait later on in the future to act. Thank you.
Great. Well, pretty straight to the point. So thank you for those elevator pitches. And thank you again for joining us, Angelique, Alyssa, and Shafira. It's now my pleasure to invite our Caribbean panelists to join us for our next conversation. So please join us in welcoming Letitia, Tarran, and Jamila, and Annika. Hello, climate warriors. It is my pleasure to introduce each of you to our audience that is tuning in from around the world. So to get started, Letitia has been an active citizen scientist with Zooniverse for over 3 years, a secondary school biology teacher at the Polytechnic Institute for the past year, and a member of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in Trinidad and Tobago. And now Tarran is a young sustainable tourism professional with over 9 years of experience in ecotourism and the hospitality sector. He now serves with the Ministry of Tourism in the Bahamas. Jamila is a Caribbean Youth Environment Network's regional chairperson, a project coordinator of CYEN Barbados, and she was a 2016 Queen Young Leaders awardee. Now finally, Annika is a climate change fellow with the Alliance of Small Island States, or AOSIS, and she is stationed at Guyana's permanent mission to the UN as an advisor with a focus on the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and climate change. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Hi. Morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Wow. So what driven group of climate warriors. Thank you for joining us. So we'd love to hear about your climate story and talk about the climate action that all of you are taking in your respective fields. Letitia, can we start with you?
Yeah, okay. So my climate story actually started in secondary school. I was in Form 6, which is the equivalent of A-levels or the last 2 years of high schools for Americans. And my environmental science teacher was trying to get us to understand the effect of deforestation. So she asked us, what would happen if we cut down all the trees? Nobody knew where she was going with that question, honestly. And so she started with, okay, so what do trees do? What do we get from trees? That was an easy question. Trees take in carbon dioxide and they give out oxygen. That seems easy enough. And then it was at that point, saying that I had this aha moment. Wait a minute, wait. So if we cut down the trees, we have more carbon dioxide in the air and less oxygen. And that kind of blew my mind. Like, I was like, what? And I was like, does everybody know about this? Do people know this? We need to tell people because I couldn't believe it. She's like, yeah, you know, this is, people know. I'm like, what? So why are we still cutting down trees? And she's a really good teacher now that I think about it, because that was her segue into us learning about sustainable development. And that's really where it all started for me, with this kind of realization that, okay, yeah, we need to be more mindful of our interactions with the environment. From there, I joined the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, and they helped me learn a lot more about the environment. And I really started to develop a passion then. After that, just some quick highlights. I would have been fortunate enough to join the World Oceans Day Youth Advisory Council. And through them, that's how I got to go to the Ocean Conference in 2017, which was like a life-changing year for me. I met Peace Boats. I went on this life-changing journey with them, and I graduated from university. So like it was a big year, 2017. But that's really how my story started, and I could tell you how it ends, not in a morbid kind of way. I know how it ends because I know that for the rest of my life, I will share my knowledge with those who want to know and those who I think need to know, because I believe that our knowledge is not for us to keep, it's for us to share with others. So that's my story. Thank you.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a brilliant lesson on how everything on this planet is really and truly interconnected. So definitely. Thank you. Tarran, can we hear from you, please?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Tyrone Simson from the Bahamas. I think my climate journey started in undergraduate. So I studied small island sustainability, and through my policy classes and natural science classes, mainly the policy classes, I started to learn more about climate policy and what the fight for small islands were. When it comes to actually practically being involved, in 2017, I attended COP23 under the Fiji presidency, and that opened my eyes so much more to the climate fight throughout the world, throughout small island nations, both in the Pacific and the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean as a whole. And from there, I just started to get involved more, especially with stuff dealing with ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment. So right now, I'm a part of YOUNGO, which is the International Youth Climate Movement, and I'm the COI 16 liaison. So basically, my job is to liaise between COI 16, which is the official Youth Climate Conference, and the YOUNGO body. And also, I'm working with a group of young Germans. The German government has sponsored a climate expert forum. It's called Building Bridges for Climate Action. And the main objective of the program is to bring young climate warriors from Latin America and the Caribbean to visit academic institutions, ministries in Germany to tell their stories, because I believe that we have to tell our stories in order for people to develop empathy. So as we move forward in pushing policy to combat the climate crisis, that those places where they're not experiencing the impacts now, they would know our stories, they would know our impacts, and have empathy as they move forward in international negotiations. Yeah.
Thank you. I can just imagine, and you know, it's great that education has been able to really open your eyes, and you have the foresight to pursue this topic and really see the effect that it has and the importance of sharing our story. It is definitely what we need. Could we hear from Jamila?
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody, again. One correction, I'm actually not the regional chair of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network right now. I'm actually the former regional chair, so I'm still a member of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. Okay, so my story, I grew up in rural Barbados. I love playing outside, always loved nature, love to see how things worked. I fell in love with geography and sciences when I got into secondary school. And then I geared my whole educational career towards environmental management. So I did my bachelor's degree in environmental management and biology. And then when I came back to Barbados, I did a master's degree in the same natural resources management, but I had a climate change focus. And then I became a teacher as well, because I love to pass on whatever knowledge I have to younger people. And then eventually I joined the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in 2013. And that's where my eyes were really open to youth advocacy. And I realized how hard youth advocacy is, because people don't really want to listen to you about the environment and about things that are happening possibly in the future. But I found with advocacy, when you relate it to, when you break down the big technical issues, when you break them down and relate them to people's personal health and well-being, and when you link it to, of course, their pocket, how will it affect my money, is when people actually would listen. So I think that's what we can really do. So I was the project coordinator for Barbados, for the Barbados chapter of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. And I was involved in the International Coastal Cleanup. We helped to organize some presentations, panel discussions, consultations, and also some studies with youth, looking at the youth perspective on different environmental issues, including climate change, biodiversity, sustainable land management. And I think that anyone could make a difference, no matter how young they are, once they are aware of the impacts. And yeah, so that's really my motivation for climate change, and see how it can really impact all of us. We can work together to make a difference. And that's it.
Truly, Jamila, and I really thank you for highlighting the importance of, localizing your climate language so that it connects and relates to the people that you're trying to advocate and raise awareness with. So finally, we have Onika. Can you please share with us?
Sure, no problem. Good morning, everyone, once again, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My climate journey, or my climate story, started since I was a little girl, finding out that my father did some work in agriculture. And me, being a total daddy's girl, wanted to work in agriculture because that's what my father did. So when I started high school, I wanted to do agriculture, then went on to A levels and got introduced to environmental science, and it just blew my mind away. And I recognized that agriculture is just a smaller part of a larger whole. And I felt it would be remiss of me to just work on this very small piece of something that has such larger impact. So from secondary school, I moved on to do my undergraduate degree in environmental studies. And whilst in the University of Guyana, I joined our student society, EcoTrust, where I was their public relations officer. And I helped to push out all of the information that we wanted to put out, whether it was brochures, pamphlets, and a whole range of material on environmental issues, including climate change. Then I later joined at the time, Caribbean Youth Environment Network, where we also helped to organize some local activities, getting the views of young people on climate change. I am now a part of the Guyana Youth and Environment Network, so I'm no longer in CYN, I'm now in GYN. And through partnership with the Office of Climate Change, we have done a nationwide climate change awareness project where we visited primary and secondary schools, and we taught the students on climate change, and we used some innovative interactive methods. We used puppetry for nursery schools as well, to ensure that young people are able to not just understand the impact, but understand the role they were playing in this entire issue. From there, I was awarded Guyana's first climate change fellowship through AOSIS. So I'm no longer in New York, I'm back in Guyana. This is in 2018, but I was able to negotiate the Paris Rulebook because my year was the last year that we had to really finalize the Paris Rulebook. And this is in 2018, and whilst being trained as a climate change negotiator, I worked at Guyana's permanent mission to the United Nations, and I advised on issues of forest, renewable energy, climate change, and sustainable development. So it's just quite a range of things. Coming from New York, I'm a member of the Georgetown Hub of the Global Shapers community. And through this group, I was able to be trained by Al Gore in their climate reality training session, and I'm now a trained climate reality leader, so I can lead climate presentations anywhere in the world to any individual. I have the benefit of not only working in the NGO sector, but NGO and civil society space, but I also work in government within the Office of the President, the Department of Environment. I lead all of their stakeholder management activities, and this includes planning for national events, national environmental observances. And we have the opportunity to write articles for the newspapers and a whole range of other interactions and engagements with various agencies and organizations, civil society, private sector, etc. I will close by saying I right now also support the G77 chairmanship, because Guyana right now chairs the G77, and I'm on the climate change team. So I do quite a lot of work within there, and I will end it there, although there are quite a number of other things that I do, but thank you so much.
Thank you, and what a journey from all of you, and what an amazing group of people we have here today, and thank you all again. So to keep things moving, could each of you briefly discuss, again, how science informs your advocacy and the importance of the Ipcc 1.5 degree special report? Tarran, as the official YOUNGO liaison for the Conference of Youth, we'd love to begin with you.
Hi again. So I spent a lot of time with the IPCC report last year, because I just wrapped up my master thesis in research in small islands. So my topic looked at the adaptation in the tourism sector for climate change from the perspective of hoteliers. And so a lot of my work has to do with tourism and climate change right now. And the IPCC report definitely influenced a lot of what I wrote in my dissertation. My research was important because when we look at small island nations, most of them depend heavily on the tourism sector for major contributions to their GDPs. But however, when we look at the product, it's very vulnerable and susceptible to international global shock stresses. We can look at COVID now. Small islands are suffering because of the closure of the travel and tourism market. And from the research that I developed, I found that a lot of hotels in rural areas in islands, according to the Ipcc, when we look at impacts to islands and what is currently happening and what's going to happen in the future, even if we just have a 1.5 target, and as Angelique said, we're on trajectory to a 2 degree increase. These hotels will suffer the most because they have the lowest adaptive capacity. So when we look at big hotels like a Marriott or another big name like a Rosewood, they have higher adaptive capacity, especially in island nations, because they're able to close shop and go somewhere else. Whereas small lodges in rural areas, they are mostly locally owned. Their perception on climate change is very little. So this hinders their ability to develop effective adaptation strategies to protect their properties. For example, in the Bahamas, last year we got hit by Hurricane Dorian, and when you looked at the Economic Council of Latin America and the Caribbean report of losses, we saw that the greatest losses were on private properties, mostly connected to the tourism sector. So lodges had been completely destroyed, and a lot of these lodge owners don't have insurance because the insurance is so expensive, especially hurricane insurance. And as we continuously have these hurricanes, and if we look at Ipcc, it is indicating exactly what is happening, but yet we don't want to use the science. If this continues to get worse, premiums are going to go up. And so therefore, insurance is going to be even further away from being, hotels will be even further away from being able to afford hurricane insurance. So this completely dissipates the adaptive capacity of stakeholders in this sector. And I think that we can definitely use the 1.5 report to educate stakeholders and for us to work together, both from the private and public sector, to develop an adaptive framework for climate change, especially in key economic areas such as tourism.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you for that personal look on something that we don't usually consider. So next, Jamila, do you mind answering?
Yeah, sure. Once again, I said that you need to link break down all these technical issues and link them to people's personal health and their money. And science is very, very important. It produces facts. And there are people denying facts, which I really don't understand how you could deny actual facts. But there's some people that actually do that. And these facts can then be turned into educational materials in a way that everyone can understand. You need to be able to reach the youngest person and also the oldest person. You need to be able to reach the most technical person and also the most like layman person. And okay, so I think that's about it actually. Yeah, so just, we need to be able to reach everyone, break it down, make it easy for everyone to understand, and then we can actually do something about it. If everyone gets on board, rather than a few people working towards that goal of climate change adaptation, we can't have everyone or most people doing the wrong thing while some people are doing the right thing. Everyone, at least the majority of people, need to get on board. So I think through science, through the IPCC report 1.5, we can definitely do something better, get more people on board.
Definitely. And it is hard to believe that people won't listen to facts. So I'm with you on that one. Yeah, so thank you. Moving on to Letitia.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to say real quick, give an update on where I am in life. Like right now, I work with UNICEF and I am managing the report platform for Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm also working in a voluntary capacity with the Environmental Research Institute of Charlottesville as their Sustainable Ecotourism Project Management Associate. Just want to give that context before I answer, because my answer is linked to that. In the context of report, just briefly what it is, it's a tool that was designed by UNICEF, which gives young people the power in the palm of their hands. So on your phone, you can access polls and give your input on issues that affect you directly. And this is how we create data. Now, the idea is that we run these polls and we get this data to find out, okay, what is an issue affecting young people? What are their solutions? What are they doing? And then we actually use the data. And this is something in the Caribbean where we don't really, we have a data issue, right? We have a data issue. And so I'm really happy that your report exists and we can, address this data gap, especially where young people are concerned. And it's not just by the way, your report isn't just for data. You can also use it to have one-on-one communications with young people, for example, through mental health chat lines. The good thing about your report is that it's free and it's anonymous, which is a good way to get people to participate. And yeah, we're talking data, but it's not very heavy. So it's not your typical questionnaire. It's supposed to be, it's on your phone. It's supposed to be very user-friendly, 10 questions max, yes, no, ABC, that kind of thing. But we actually can extract a lot of data from those questions, right? So this is the one aspect, and I'm really happy about it. Just by the way, for all those viewing, the report is currently active in over 60 countries. So if you don't know about it, you can Google it to see if there is one in your country and how you can get involved or how you can use this data to support young people in your country. The other thing I want to talk about briefly, actually, concerning your report, because I saw Grace asked a really good question, and I just want to answer that too. She asked if we can share how our climate advocacy has been impacted by COVID-19. So last year, one of my colleagues at UNICEF presented a report at the last COP on behalf of young people of the Caribbean. This report contained data that was gathered through your report and also through questionnaires done around the Caribbean with the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. And it basically spoke about what were our issues, what solutions we want governments to take, and what solutions we can take. So this year, my plan was to follow up on that and actually implement some of the suggestions by young people. Well, I don't mean me, I mean support young people in implementing those solutions in Trinidad and Tobago. But then, COVID and all of that. So kind of at a situation now where I'm trying to think about like a unique way to do this because everybody's online now. So I don't want to do another online thing because it'd be very hard as a student. You're online for classes all the time and then you still have to be online for anything else, you know? So I'm trying to think of a way to be online but offline at the same time, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what COVID has done to not just me, I'm sure a lot of people it has affected, you know, your plans like that. The other thing I want to mention with regards to ERIC, the Environmental Research Institute of Charlottesville, well, there's research in their Leem, right? So they do a lot of data gathering. They actually work with a lot of students come here and do research for their master's or PhD. For example, research related to corals, sharks, sea turtles, all types of things. And I just wanted to say that recently, I did tree planting for the first time in my life. I've never gone tree planting before. Admittedly, it's because I kind of thought I thought it was kind of lame, right? I mean, you're planting a tree, that's really not a big deal. Until I did it, and I realized the really big effect that something as so simple as tree planting can have. Yes, we know, and we did coastal tree planting, yeah? So we are trying to maintain beaches, maintain coastlines. And you know, this is one hand, but then there's also the fact that when you plant trees, it provides an ecological service. It now presents a new food source and home for more animals. So you're contributing to maintaining your biodiversity as well. And then there's the tourism benefit where, I mean, if you go to the beach to lime or relax, you want to have trees for shade, right? Everybody wants a cool spot on the beach. So there's that aspect. And another aspect which I also learned is that, well, if you have sea grape in your country, so we have sea grape here, you can actually use the grapes to make wine. So now you have another revenue earner. And all of this from tree planting. And I was like, whoa. And the reason why I wanted to share it now is because we're all home. Well, most people are home now. And if you live on an island and there's a beach accessible to you that you think, you know, you can help with some tree planting, I would encourage you to reach out to your government agencies and work with them to organize that. We work in groups of 5, so you don't have to worry about the numbers. You don't need a lot of people, but you can make a big impact with something so simple. Yeah, or concerning the Ipcc, I think Angelique really kind of handled it. I love her response, I agree 100%.
Great, thank you so much. And finally, as we are a little bit over time for this panel, our last question, please, Annika, if you could just finish us out on that note.
Hi, just to confirm, would you like me to speak to the advocacy question or the IPC, or how science informs my work?
The latter.
Okay. In Guyana, science informs everything we do. Most persons might think Guyana is not an island. Well, it's not an island, but we're a small island developing state based on our characteristics. And everything we do is informed by science, especially that included in the 1.5 report. Right now, Guyana is updating our NDC in line with Paris Agreement commitments, and we will be submitting an updated NDC, and we're using the science to ensure the work that we're putting in there is relevant and timely for our country. Through a class I lecture at the University of Guyana, I ensure that the students can receive the latest science, so when they're ready to do their projects, they have the information at hand, and the 1.5 degree report plays a big part in that. In my role at the Department of Environment, whenever we write briefs for ministers, whenever we reach out to ambassadors or write for the newspapers, we ensure that we do research right before we write any article to send out anywhere, or we create a brochure of any kind, because when doing advocacy work, we must ensure we're giving people updated information and the most relevant information, because as a small state, we need this information to inform our projects so that we can ensure sustainability, so that we can ensure it can be scaled up should the need arise, and so that we will not waste valuable resources. Thank you very much.
And all I ask is that all of us tuning in further amplify the words and works of our Caribbean warriors. So thank you all, Caribbean warriors, for joining us. We really wish we could keep this great conversation going, but unfortunately we need to keep on track. So it's now my pleasure to bring on our speakers for the final panel, Island Leaders from the Frontlines. Please join me in welcoming Florence, Rhoda, and Sand.
Welcome, everyone, and please, for this final panel, we ask that responses remain around 60 seconds, just to make sure we stay on schedule. So for some quick introductions, Florence is the president of the Highlands and Islands Students Association, an academic rock star with a focus on international literature based in Lewis. Rhoda is a tech entrepreneur from the Isle of Tiree, rooted in the Gaelic culture of the Scottish Islands. And Assad is an engineer in energy and environment from the University of Technology of Belfort-Montbéliard, France. He is currently a project manager at UNDP Comoros, supporting his country in areas related to sustainable development, climate change, and energy.
Yes, so thank you guys for joining us. So we'd love to begin this important discussion with each of you sharing your personal climate story and also talk about the climate action that you're spearheading. Florence, can we start with you?
Absolutely. When I moved first to the island, I really moved into a region that has a lot more been more affected by climate change than what I was used to in Germany. So that was a very interesting change and made me more aware of the issue. And my own activism is very much at the grassroots of the movement. It's very much focused on how we can make the education sector a lot more sustainable and how we can make our institutions leader within the climate action. We should put sustainability in every aspect of our activity and actively push for change throughout the power of education. It's about educating the future generations about sustainable life and normalizing it and normalizing sustainable innovation. And it's also though about pushing cultural change without the communities that we serve locally with our institutions as well. And I think COVID especially offers us now a really great opportunity of pushing for change and making a green recovery to our economy and our institutions as well, and stop funding non-sustainable economies for our education sectors.
Definitely, Florence. Thank you for drawing on the importance of having to start these practices from a very young age, and they'll start practicing once they continue on in their life. Definitely. Rhoda.
Sure. So I live in the Isle of Tiree, which is just off the west coast of Scotland, and I think my journey started when I moved back to my family home and started crofting, which is a type of farming. It's small holding, and learning about the land that my family has worked for generations. And I watch it change. We have very low intensity way of working. We live below sea level, mainly in this island, and we're seeing both an erosion of our coastline, but we're also seeing an erosion of our culture and the way in which we operate and farm. And I was really struck by someone mentioning about taking climate from the point of view of culture. And so the approach that I've taken is to say, how can we keep our young people here? How can we encourage a permanent population? And how can we keep these practices going? And the approach I'm taking is, how do we build small businesses? So how do we build small businesses that operate outside the tourist season as well as in it, and create a really resilient economy so that we have the people here who can protect our islands and keep us moving forward in a way that really supports the environment.
Thank you, Rhoda. I don't feel alone when I hear you say, you wanted to see change, and there you are right now driving that change. So thank you for your work. Lastly, Sand.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Comoros. So for me, it started in primary school when I realized the energy problem that we were facing. So it really was for energy. So no electricity 24/7. First time I had electricity for 24/7 is when I moved to France for my studies. So I was thinking when I got in high school, that's where I learned that you can actually convert solar energy into electricity, water. You can also use wind. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's exactly what I want to do. Then I learned about climate change, climate negotiations, and environment diplomacy later at my engineering school in France, especially a course, course titled International Environmental Diplomacy. Then I started to learn more about it. Then I got into climate negotiations when I started my training as a climate change negotiator with the Alliance of Small Island States. So I followed the climate finance track. So that's where I lost faith in humanity a couple of times, and then I came back home and I was like, okay, I need to continue this fight. Now it's just a lifestyle, from being a vegan, cleaning up beaches, working in sustainable agriculture, and talking to people about climate change whenever I can. So by example, I just hope that people around me, just by seeing me and see the positive impact that it had on my life, will question themselves maybe, and hopefully just like start engaging in our fight against climate change.
Well, thank you all for sharing those stories and really articulating those experiences. I think it's important for our audience and our viewers to relate to the situation that we're in when talking about these issues. So moving on to the next question, which you may have heard before, could you just each talk about how science informs your advocacy and the importance of the Ipcc 1.5 degree special report? So Saad, you've actually been a part of Comoros' climate change negotiations within the UNFCCC. So we'd love to start with you.
Okay, so I feel like almost like everything was already said by our amazing speakers, but I would just say that like for science, it's all about like evidences and facts. They're very important, and raising awareness also. Even though like for all islands, we're experiencing like the same kind of like negative like effects of climate change, but our level of awareness is definitely not the same. So in terms of like linking the natural disaster that we see climate change with climate change, so when I speak to university students, for example, or policymakers here, it's very important to support our advocacy with science and come with like maybe figures and numbers, sometimes simplified. For example, when I work in sustainable agriculture with the UNDP and with rural communities, so science is a huge support also for work that we are doing right now. So like, just like the amount of science-based information available, like to demonstrate that we are already experiencing like what we are already experiencing is related to climate change. This is like very important. So rise of temperature, like rainfall patterns, like changing, like even like pest and disease management. It's so important. And like one of the panelists like just said that, the speakers, when you talk to them and they don't really understand, just like talk about money. This will affect your money and how you bring food on the table. And that's how I saw the impact of all the science and how I can use that like in my daily work. So that's helped to justify why we need now to make that transition happen in our like natural resources management, agriculture and land use, and also in energy sector, for example.
Thank you, and thank you for that inside look. Rhoda, what about you?
I think for us, it's, someone mentioned earlier that you don't get to negotiate with science. The numbers are the numbers, and I think, you know, for me, I see it every day. I see the tide getting that bit higher. I see dunes eroded, the bits of land that haven't been seen since, you know, my grandfather was alive, and I see a physical change around us. And so it's that practical element of science, I guess, that drives what I do. When you live so close to the water and somewhere that is so fragile, you feel it. And I'm better at doing that, I think, than reading reports. But the 1.5 degrees, it just brings it home hugely to me. So yeah, those are the things that drive me, along with things like depopulation, the things that I see around me that map to that science and really drive me to try and make a change on a practical level. How can we create sustainable businesses that make our environment better around us and reduce that reliance on corporations and big business and everything that comes with that?
Right. And yeah, and definitely thank you for your perspective. I think we all sometimes have trouble relating to that very intimate aspect of climate change, which is our personal physical environment and what we've grown to. So thank you for that. And finally, Florence.
Yeah, I very much echo what Rhoda already said. I think science and research really enable us to make informed decisions about our own personal life, but also the wider impact of ourselves on the community. And it really is also the innovation that we get out of the science and the research that enables us to kind of make especially the education sector as well around sustainability a lot more accessible, and probably more accessible than it's ever been. so that is a really, really interesting to see as well. And it is really the fuel of campaigns across the world around climate action. So, and even though 1.5 degrees doesn't sound like a lot, I think it's just a reminder that we already see the negative impacts of the climate change, and it's time that we trust our experts and that our leaders trust the experts, and just stop talking about change. It's about getting our leaders as well to take proactive action against climate change and to enable us to have a future and preserve this earth for next generation as well.
So connecting the dots with all of your answers, how can viewers and those who are tuning in meaningfully support your efforts, and what message do you hope that they come away with from this conversation? Florence, you can go ahead, or Sand, yes, please do.
Okay, I would just say like we need to continue just like to give a voice to the youth, because every time we talk about like young people, they are the ones who are gonna take over these blah 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 and all the speeches, but actually they also give us a timeline, a deadline. Like after 35 years old, you're not even considered as like a young person, when even if like in your mind you've been doing that for years and years. So continue to give a voice to young people, provide more trainings also in all areas, and emphasize the climate change aspect of whatever we want to learn or want to teach them. So climate change is a cross-cutting issue, and our people need strong knowledge on climate change so that like our advocacy and the impact that we can make on those negotiations, for example, can be even like bigger.
Thank you. Florence?
I think for me, it's really about getting involved and finding the niche of activism within the climate change movement that is your passion and that makes you passionate about the movement. And it's also very much about holding your local councils and your local governments to account to what they've signed up to in agreements, which they sadly always like to talk about but don't necessarily act on as much as we would like them to. And it's also thinking about making small changes in your own life and share your passion for the movement and raise awareness around it in general.
Definitely, Florence. And finally, can we have Rhoda?
Sure. So one of the flagship program we're running at the moment is connecting small businesses and making it easier for people to shop from really small micro businesses. So I guess one thing I would emphasize is thinking about, as we all do, but how we can make connections to step this that bit more lightly on this earth and help these small businesses. So if you're ever thinking, about shopping, we're going for indie. The one thing that I have realized from doing that is how important those connections are, and connecting through our own islands. There are so many of them, and I hadn't realized how important that network is. And I've loved being part of this. It's been incredible to be part of a worldwide network. And so I just encourage everyone to find that network that lets you do your best work.
Thank you all for those answers, and thank you so much again for joining us today. It's been a privilege, Florence, Rhoda, and Saad. So I hope you all have an amazing rest of the day. And now it's our pleasure to be sharing with you a message from the front lines. And we'll turn it over to Esteban Andreas Araya Silva, who has pre-recorded a message for the Virtual Island Summit. Take it away.
Mi nombre es Esteban Araya Silva, soy licenciado en Geografía de la Universidad de Chile y voy a hablar sobre el rol de la juventud en el cambio climático y la preservación. En pleno curso de una pandemia que nos afecta a todos, a ratos se olvida que en este mismo escenario llamado planeta Tierra, convivimos con un cambio climático que cada vez es mayor, más agresivo en cuanto a sus impactos, y no solo en la geografía de nuestros territorios, sino que en el modo y calidad de vida de todas las personas. El cambio climático es real, pero sus impactos aún son menospreciados por tomadores de decisiones, quienes muchas veces planifican y toman acciones o medidas sin considerar la diversidad de los territorios, la gestión y a las personas. El cambio climático está aquí, y el actual modelo de desarrollo que lleva el mundo solo contribuye al aumento de los impactos de este. Quienes estamos viendo y verán en medida que avanza el tiempo los mayores y peores impactos del cambio climático somos los jóvenes y niños de hoy. Sin querer desconocer el trabajo realizado por diversas agrupaciones y personas años atrás, su trabajo no siempre pudo ser conocido en todo el mundo. Hoy en día, la globalización y el constante desarrollo de las tecnologías de la información y comunicación permiten una comunicación y visibilización en tiempo real, en donde los jóvenes hemos tomado un rol activo frente al cambio climático desde diversas áreas, ya sea la educación, la tecnología, la divulgación científica o pequeñas acciones locales de conservación que permiten aprovechar sus habilidades para hacer frente al cambio climático. El rol de los jóvenes es clave, ya que somos un actor de la sociedad crítico, ya que parte de ser joven implica cuestionarlo todo. Y el pensamiento crítico de los jóvenes es importante porque tenemos la capacidad de identificar los problemas, presentar soluciones, exponer problemáticas y derribar prejuicios. Los jóvenes podemos transformarnos en agentes de cambio, que con acciones aportemos a movilizar a otros jóvenes e incluso a otros actores de la sociedad. Además, el uso y manejo de redes sociales posibilita la conectividad y creación de redes de apoyo. Muchas veces nos enfrentamos a problemas sociales, ambientales, laborales y personales, lo que nos permite ser más comprensivos a las problemáticas que nos afectan a todos, siendo capaces de pensar, desarrollar y compartir nuevas ideas y soluciones que sean innovadoras y alternativas a los problemas actuales. El cambio climático y toda la atmósfera que rodea la toma de decisiones a nivel internacional muchas veces no está al alcance de todas las personas. Y en este problema de comunicación, los jóvenes hemos tomado y marcado un hito, ya que a través de la comunicación hemos logrado compartir a nivel familiar, local e incluso en la agenda nacional temas de cambio climático o desarrollo sostenible, permitiéndonos articular actores y democratizar el acceso a la información. Los jóvenes somos solidarios y me detengo en esta parte, ya que para enfrentar problemas debemos actuar en comunidad, crear lazos y compartir el conocimiento. Debemos dejar atrás el ego, el egoísmo y entender que una mejor sociedad, un mejor desarrollo y un mejor planeta se construyen entre todos, respetándonos y compartiendo. Es por lo anterior que muchos jóvenes nos hemos transformado en líderes de nuestros espacios, escuelas, universidades, comunidades, etc., al estar empoderados del conocimiento de nuestros derechos y nuestras habilidades de liderazgo. Nos ha permitido lograr acciones que pueden verse pequeñas, pero que contribuyen a una mejora en la calidad de vida de todos. Pequeñas acciones como limpiezas de playa, actividades de educación y divulgación ambiental, difusión de la problemática climática en el mundo y sus efectos en el país, me han permitido compartir con numerosas personas, desde grupos locales hasta grandes acciones, como visibilizar la destrucción de humedales costeros, participar en seminarios internacionales, medios de comunicación y otros, visibilizando la importancia de la conservación de la biodiversidad y de ecosistemas como humedales, para frenar y amortiguar el impacto del cambio climático. Este trabajo que no solo realizo yo, sino que muchos otros jóvenes, no está exento de problemas, ya que aún hay quienes creen que la conservación es una limitante para el desarrollo, amedrentándonos para que no sigamos realizándolo. Es por ello, y que como habitante de la región, creo que es urgente que los países firmen acuerdos y tratados, acuerdos como el de Escazú, que brinda, entre otros, protección a los defensores ambientales. Los jóvenes debemos lograr que se entienda que la conservación es una oportunidad para el desarrollo, muchos de estos ligados a cumplir las metas de los objetivos del desarrollo sostenible. Las organizaciones lideradas por jóvenes, y sus redes en particular, deben ser apoyadas y reforzadas, porque contribuyen a potenciar el desarrollo de las capacidades de liderazgo de jóvenes y niños. Es necesario que se fomente la participación de la juventud en procesos de toma de decisión, considerar la opinión de estos, ayudar, patrocinar sus actividades y proyectos, sobre todo los relacionados a educación ambiental, conservación, ciencia, etc., así como impulsar programas de conservación orientados a jóvenes para dotarlos de las capacidades. Muchas gracias.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Esteban, for that. And now it's my distinct honor to turn the program over to our very own Selina Leem, who will be performing a poem to close out the next generation of island leaders, the Virtual Island Summit. So Selina, the floor is yours.
I want to apologize quickly because I'll be reading from my book as I haven't memorized the poem yet, but thank you, Chet. Into the horizons we marched, Children with skinny, gangly limbs, each tiny step on the reef that comes out of hiding during low tide. A warrior determination our ancestors would have sang their praise for. For our home, for our country, us little warriors will save. Each of us with corals in our hands, spread out into a long horizontal line, our front to the roaring waves, our back to our lamoran, our land. We put the corals into the shallow water and went to get more. Grow, little ones, grow corals. We read that corals grew towards the sun. Grow, little ones, be the giant we need you to be. In the wildly adventurous minds of a child, they would grow to be giants. Day after day, we would go to the ocean side, our horizon, check all the corals. Have they grown? Little hands picking them up. This seems bigger. Yes, we are saved. Each year, we saw the corals less. The waves grew bigger. My uncle's house got torn down. They ran out of their house with their screeching babies, their belongings swallowed by the ocean. Our seawalls cracked, savaged down to broken pieces of hope and fear. Our hope crumpled down with our fortress. Our fear rose with each rising wave, night after night with each high tide. But people forget, the media turns a blind eye to, that in a state of anger, fear, and panic, people act. We do not flee, we act. We will not flee, we will act. Because with each rising wave is our rising resilience and sense of urgency for justice, for home, for us. Marshall Islands, the weeping home to 62 nuclear bombs. Marshall Islands, so damn strong, absorbing each blow by blow by blow by blow. Marshallese, us, learned that we had no choice to live with the dire impact. Our DNA now riddled with poisons to be passed down onto our children and their children. Lands were lost, people never to return, displaced. Marshall Islands, home to a dome suffocating with nuclear waste that leaks day by day into the land to the rising water. But we lived, we are surviving. Most importantly, we stayed. We stayed. Let history repeat itself, pillaged by nature, angered by humanity's lack of morals, misplaced sense of responsibility, greed to take more than they deserve. You higher ups, blinded by your wants, Suma told me, Selina, your needs will last you a lifetime, your wants will not. So tread carefully. No, it is not in 2040, 2050, no, now. Now is what I need you to respond to. I've seen bones of loved ones spilling out of broken graves, torn by the angry waves. Nightmares haunt me at night and follows me throughout the day. The terror I feel, act now. I stand here, I sit here really, for my people, my home. Our corals never grew to be the giant we needed them to be, to protect us from the rising water. But I did to 5'3", the giant to protect my home from the waves of deniers, and work hand in hand with those we're fighting for our planet. Together, each of us, like the tiny corals my friends and I put out in a horizontal line near the outer reef, grew tall, grow tall, to stay, to be the giants for our planet. Thank you.
Selina, oh my gosh, it is such an honor to be co-hosting with you. You are an amazing writer, and that was utterly beautiful. And to all our viewers, you are so lucky to have just witnessed that. So I'd just like to highlight an event this Thursday, Reverse the Trend, Save Our People, Save Our Planet. This benefit event will bring diverse artists and youth activists together to discuss both youth activism and how art can help motivate the public to tackle both nuclear weapons and climate change, the twin existential threats facing humanity. So we'll post the link for that in the chat, and please sign up to attend.
Thank you so much, Chet. Yes, I hope that everyone can attend on Thursday supporting such an important cause. Well, our program has come to a close. So thank you everyone for joining us today for the next generation of island leaders at the Virtual Island Summit. We'd like to thank the Island Innovation team for making this possible, and of course, James Ellsmoor for his leadership. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Island Innovation Team. And on behalf of the March for Science team and the Island Resilience Partnership, it's been a privilege to host this session. And as a reminder, we hope everyone tuning in can do 3 things. 1, sign up for YOUNGO, the official youth constituency of the UNFCCC. This is how you can meaningfully be a part of international climate change negotiations moving forward. And along with that, you can apply to be a part of the March for Science Global Youth Ambassadors Network, which we are launching in partnership with YOUNGO. And this network of youth leaders across the globe will be given access to customized collaboration platforms that help amplify climate action around the world. And we will be accepting 5 ambassadors per country, so we hope you apply. And third and finally, March for Science and YOUNGO are calling on island governments and leaders to join the Science Not Silence campaign and publicly support the Ipcc 1.5 degree special report, which has been blocked at COP24 and COP25. This shameless attack on science by a few countries, you know who you are, will not stop the world from uniting behind the science. But we need everyone to join this movement heading into COP26 if we want to achieve success. So that's why we hope everyone joins us on September 29th during the United Nations General Assembly for the Island Resilience Forum, co-hosted by our campaign partner, AOSIS, where we will highlight countries joining the Science Not Silence campaign and building support for this important movement. We'll post links for all of these call to actions in the chat. And again, thank you for tuning in, for doing your part. Thank you to my co-host Selina and for all of our amazing panelists. Much love, climate warriors, and have a great day.